2 hours before the polls in California were even closed, Ronald Reagan was standing in his bathroom with a towel wrapped around him, his hair dripping wet. He had just learned that he was going to be the 40th President of the United States. As Reagan recollects, shortly before noon on January 20th, 1981, President-elect and Mrs. Reagan left Blair House, the Washington guest house for visiting heads of state, and were driven through the gates of the White House and up to the North Portico. President and Mrs. Carter were waiting for them. A few minutes later, by tradition, the President and President-elect got in one car while Mrs. Reagan and the First Lady got in another for the drive to the inaugural ceremonies. As they drove up Pennsylvania Avenue, Reagan remembers the limousine being eerily quiet. He and President Carter were sitting side by side, and although polite, Carter said hardly a word to Reagan as they moved slowly toward the Capitol. Reagan could sense a little of how President Carter felt that day. To have served as president, been through the intense highs and lows of the job, to have tried to do what he thought was right, to have had all the farewells and parties, and then be forced out of the White House by a vote of the people. Reagan felt it must have been very hard on Carter.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office.
It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise. It is time for us to realize that we're too great a nation to limit ourselves to small dreams. We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to an inevitable decline. I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what we do. I do believe in a fate that will fall on us if we do nothing. So with all the creative energy at our command, let us begin an era of national renewal. Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength. And let us renew our faith and our hope. We have every right to dream heroic dreams. And after all, why shouldn't we believe that? We are Americans.
In describing Inauguration Day, Reagan would say we'd had the elections, the election night parties, the weeks of planning for my administration, the hours spent choosing the cabinet, and then the pomp of the inaugural ceremony. But it was only then that he appreciated the enormity of what had happened to him. We danced our feet off at 10 different balls throughout Washington, he said. We spent our first night in the White House, but the next day the celebrating was over. It was time to get down to work.
Some 30 minutes ago, the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free of Iran.
In early February, the new president told Americans that solving problems that accumulated over decades would take time, but with everyone working together, it could be done. He warned there was no quick fix, but that the country cannot delay implementation of an economic program aimed at both reducing tax rates to stimulate productivity and reducing the growth in government spending to reduce unemployment and inflation. Reagan sent a bill to Congress calling for an across-the-board 30% tax cut over 3 years. Meanwhile, he launched a program under Vice President Bush to reduce unnecessary government regulation of the economy. Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill and other Democrats in Congress wasted no time in announcing their fierce opposition to the bill. The president invited O'Neill to the White House to discuss their differences. Reagan found O'Neill to be full of Irish warmth, a great storyteller, and Reagan liked him. But it was evident to the president that O'Neill had come to the Oval Office to set the new president straight on how things operated in, quote, the big leagues. Somewhat insulted, the president felt that having spent 8 years as governor of one of America's largest states wasn't exactly the minor leagues. The two men agreed that since they were going to have to do business together, they should try their best to get along. O'Neill made it clear to Reagan that he felt Reagan intended to dismantle everything in Washington that O'Neill had come to believe in, what he and other Democrats had spent decades fighting for, starting with the New Deal. Reagan understood his concern. Within a few days, the Reagan administration unveiled a plan to cut billions of federal expenditures by eliminating various boards, agencies, and programs deemed needless, as a start toward reducing the $80 billion budget deficit. The Democrats were livid and countered with proposals for drastic cuts in defense spending, with full knowledge that Reagan was determined to reverse the effects of years of neglect on the military. Pentagon leaders had appalled Reagan with stories of how the Soviets were gaining militarily on America, both in nuclear and conventional forces. They were spending 50% more each year on weapons than we were. Reagan told the Joint Chiefs he wanted to do whatever it took to make our men and women proud to wear their uniforms again. He solicited their ideas as to what new weapons we needed to re-achieve military superiority.
The President and I oftentimes don't see eye to eye. We have our little squabbles, but when he calls me at night, he says, "Is it 6 o'clock? Can we talk friendly?" Sure, absolutely. So we swap an Irish story or two. Mr. President, you know, we have differed in philosophy, but I want to tell you how much I admire your ability, your talent, the way you handle the American people, the love that the American people have for you, and your leadership, even though I am opposed to it.